Hello, everybody, and welcome to Command Point. A lot has happened lately with Kill Team since the last tier list, because obviously, that's what we're here for, is the tier list. You clicked on it. You want to know the hot takes, the way that I rank these teams. We had, since the last tier list, we've had the Morok box come out. I believe we had an FAQ come out before that. Now we've had the new data slate, and most importantly, now it's the summertime. So now I can officially make the summer Command Point tier list, the sacred tier list, so to speak. So before I get into this and start spewing my opinions at you, obvious disclaimer that this is just my opinion, and if you disagree, that's actually totally all right. In fact, if you disagree, I encourage you to post something down in the comment section and let me know why you disagree, because I like the engagement and I like having conversations about this game. So I want to start by specifying one thing that I haven't specified before, that kind of, I was thinking about it recently, and I think it's important to clarify one thing about the tier list, especially looking at it the way that I have it now in my brain, and that's that anything below B tier I do not consider to be really competitively relevant. I'm still going to rank all the teams, all the Compendium teams. I'm not just ranking the specialist teams, but anything below B tier is not something that I consider to be a faction you can take to an event, to a competitive setting, at a real actual big tournament. I mean, like 30 plus players, not like a small RTT, and expect to reasonably top three or win, really. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions to that. Somebody might be able to take one of the teams below B tier and top three at a big tournament, but that has a lot more to do with them as a player than the faction itself. And so let's get all of those out of the way. First of all, let's do the Shadow Realm. Obviously, Compendium Troop, Thousand Suns Compendium, and Thousand Suns Forge World. Those teams are all in the Shadow Realm because they are actually like completely irrelevant. There's no reason to play them. They may as well not exist anymore. GW's basically told you, don't play these teams. Play the specialist versions. So nothing changed there, and there's been no additions to the Shadow Realm either. So that's a thing. F tier, we've got Trader Space Marines, Tau, Compendium Tau, Hunter Cadre, I believe it's called, and Kroot. Kroot is the worst team for me right now. I don't think that the changes are doing them any good. Really, it just kind of feels like with each release, Kroot almost kind of get worse, which is really unfortunate. I think they're the worst right now. So I'm not going to spend too much time diving into these teams below B tier, because I think, as we'll get into it, I kind of have a different outlook on this stuff. I'm not going to rate this because this is kind of like a leftover thing. Let's just get it out of here. In D tier, we have Ecclesiarchy, Deathwatch, basically Compendium Space Marines that aren't Scouts or Deathwatch. Outside of that, these teams I haven't really seen them do much of anything. Deathwatch, I think, is clearly better than the other Space Marines, but that's not saying a ton. Ecclesiarchy, early on in the game's life cycle, they were a faction that I think could do things. Like when the only specialist teams were like Octarius and like Hunterclade. I think back then, Ecclesiarchy could perhaps have been relevant for a short period of time, but I just don't see it anymore. Moving on to C tier. So these are, in my opinion, the best teams that you could take that I do not consider to be competitively relevant. The order here, you can mix it up, and some people are going to disagree with me on some of these. I love Greenskins. For a long time, I considered them to be kind of like a sneaky sleeper Compendium team, and they almost kind of still are. I mean, this is like, one of the higher compendium ratings that we're going to end up having by the end of this tier list. So, that says something. But yeah, and I've had some good players tell me that, compendium gene stealer cults are actually secretly good. So I would, if this is really a team that interests you, don't let the tier here dispel you from playing them. But I do not think you can take these, what is this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11 teams and go to a big tournament, go to LVO or KTO or, whatever the major is in your local scene, and expect to have a reasonable chance of making top 3. Obviously, anything can happen. I'm not going to dispute that. I mean, technically, a guy went top 3 at a 50-player Warhammer World Tournament with Grey Knights just like a week or 2 ago. Granted, there was a lot of weirdness to that. Props to that guy for going 3-0. But, I mean, it was a 50-player tournament with only 3 rounds, so you had, like, an entire top 8 of undefeated players. So I don't really consider that to be, like, a super useful data as far as, like, a tournament result goes. But, yeah, I mean, it's just proof that, sometimes the stars might align. And, that you might just play very well and things might work out for you. But as far as I'm concerned, the real tier list starts at the B tier. So how exactly do we want to start here? So the other side of this coin is if you're in B tier, I think this is like the worst of the teams that you can reasonably go to a tournament with and hope to perform well. It's still, as far as the competitive meta of this game goes, the teams in the B tier, in my eyes, are only barely relevant, and it's still pretty close. So the way that I want to start, we're going to throw demons in here, and this is my own bias. A lot of people are going to say the demons are not in this part of the tier list. I think they easily are. Honestly, I actually think they're one of the better B tier teams. I've played them a lot at this point. And I think actually with the grenade change, that only helps demons. They're a team that doesn't have grenades. They're a team that is obviously pretty... they don't love seeing frag grenades and even crack grenades on the other side. So that's a nice little bump for them, but not a super noticeable bump. Yeah, I really I like demons. Honestly, one of their worst matchups, in my opinion, was the Grey Knights spamming those psych out grenades, and they can't do that anymore. So one less terrible matchup for demons. Next, moving on, we have Corsairs. Do not let that 59% win rate in the Warhammer community article on the Dataslate fool you. Corsairs are one of the worst bespoke teams. I was saying this on the last tier list, and I am sticking to my guns on that. I just really do not... I think they're really lacking. I just don't understand why they have 9 models. In my opinion, pre-buff, I think Hunterclade was better than Corsairs, and I understand not a lot of people shared that opinion with me, but post changes, there's obviously no doubt at all which team is better there. I actually don't think the Corsairs are the worst bespoke team. We'll get to that. But yeah, I just think that they are, like, as a team, they are very pillow-fisted. And I know some people are going to say, oh, they have power swords that do damage 4-6, and they've got a blaster that's AP2 and, like, 5-6 damage. And that is true. They do have those things. But the problem is all of those things, that's 4 attacks hitting on 3s. I think they have one weapon that has 5 attacks, and it's the Shredder, which is obviously you use it for the blast, not for the potency of that weapon. You have these power swords that do 4-6 damage. They have lethal 5, but you're 4 attacks on 3s, and this faction has no native rerolls at all. So half the time, there's a pretty good chance that you're just going to only hit twice, at which point your opponent's just going to parry, and you've kind of failed, unless you're using command point rerolls, which is just not a situation that you want to be in. I don't know. And they only have 9 bodies, which I really don't understand. I think they should have been shipped with 10, personally. Their only thing, really, is that they are fast. They can't really kill very well, not super reliably, and they don't really have the bodies to be a very good objective team. They're just kind of, they move fast, and they have like the utility of being able to move, shoot, dash, which is certainly interesting. I mean, you're really hoping that you spike on a lot of these attacks because we're talking about lots of shuriken weapons, so rending. But it's, half the time you're gonna not do enough to even hurt them, and the other half the time, you might roll a crit and then suddenly you're doing a lot more damage. So there's a ton of variance with Corsairs, and I just really, I don't like them competitively. I think they have horrible matchups into the top teams, just like atrocious personally, and I put them below demons personally. So next up we have Craftworld. Craftworld, up until this data slate, I actually considered to be a little bit better than Corsairs lately, but one of their main things was being able to spam 5 2 EP plasma grenades, which they can no longer do. That was like the one thing that was just barely putting them above Corsairs for me. But Corsairs are overall a much more flexible team, and they can do a lot more, even though, despite all the negative things I just said about them, they're a lot. They have a much bigger bag of tricks, I guess you can say, and that's enough for me to put Craftworld behind Corsairs. I will say that Craftworld is a lot easier to play. They're a lot easier to pilot. You have more bodies. You're gonna have like 3 or 4 more bodies. 2 to 3 more bodies, which is significant. Actually, it doesn't sound like a lot, but I do consider it to be a pretty big difference. That being said, because they are really lacking in really any significant melee prowess, and they're really behind on as far as tricks go compared to Corsairs, I'm going to put them behind Void Scarred right now. Next up, we have Custodes, Talons of the Emperor. Whether you want to run them 2-5, 2-2, 4 Custodes, or 2 Custodes and 5 Sisters, they are still kind of a scary Compendium team, one of the better Compendium teams. I know I have them behind Craftworld, which is just kind of crazy, considering a few months back before the first data slate, I was calling Craftworld the worst team in the game, and at one point Talons looked like the best team in the game. They were before the first set of nerfs. Talons, the Custodes are still extremely relevant models. I think the nerf to grenades is probably an overall good thing for them. There's only so many things on your list that can actually chunk damage off of a Custode, and one of those things was crack grenades, which you have far less access to now. So you're going to notice this is a common thread, is the ripple effect of the grenade change, of being only able to take one of each type of grenade. Significant ripple effect. A lot of teams consider it a stealth buff, kind of. There's teams that consider it kind of like a stealth nerf, like Craftworld, like I just mentioned. I think Talons are, honestly, I'm going to say Talons are above Craftworld because of this. Craftworld do have a lot of bodies, and I think that Craftworld really actually does have good tools to deal with, 4 Custodes with the double fusion setup. But I think overall, most of the time, Talons are going to win that matchup, so let's bump them above. But Talons are Talons. There's been a lot said about them. They can do cool out-of-activation shenanigans with Brotherhood of Demigods at the end of the turn, which I think is actually really good against teams that out-activate them. Talons they're a legit team. Next up, we have what I consider to be the worst of the bespoke teams, Blooded, Traitor Guard. In my opinion, this team is kind of dead on arrival. I guess not technically arrival, because there was like a week or two where they came out and people were saying, oh, this team doesn't look that strong, but then some people were like, oh, well, they can take 4 crack grenades, so that's got to be worth something, and they're a horde with 12 activations. Their number one tool just kind of evaporated. So, and I just don't see what the team brings to the table outside of just bodies. They're a much worse version of Veteran Guard. And I don't think there's much debating that. And I think that I would have put them below pre-buff Hunterclade. I put them below Corsairs now. Before the grenade change, I would have reluctantly put Blooded above Corsairs, but now it's hard to justify that. The rest of their equipment, in my opinion, is honestly, for the most part, other than the Grizzly trophy equivalent, is so kind of mediocre that you were just defaulting to crack grenades a lot of the time. But now that they don't have crack grenades, unlike some teams, I don't see Blooded as having a ton of great options for all to spend those equipment points on. And because of that, I'm really low on them. Maybe some people will prove me wrong and perform really well. They are a horde after all, and how bad can a horde be in this game? Looking at you, Kroot. But no, really, I don't think that the Blooded offer too much when stacking up against a lot of the other specialist teams in the game, and even some of the higher tier Compendium teams like Demons and Talons and Craftworld here. So yeah, I really don't like Blooded. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. Well, we'll see. I currently think that they are pretty mediocre. And then we've got Tyrionids. What do I need to say about Tyrionids that hasn't been said already? To be quite honest, the change here, the grenade change, I think Tyrionids are one of the teams that has been buffed the most by the grenade change. Once upon a time, we were all horrified of Gene Stealers and 10 Gene Stealers. And then, collectively the community said, oh, well, if we just take a bunch of grenades, we can kind of deal with that and mitigate that problem. Well, that's not a thing anymore. So, I mean, maybe I'm underselling Tyrionids right now. I don't think so, but maybe I am. First of all, crack grenades were excellent against warriors. I mean, if we're going to ignore without even talking about the Gene Stealer problem that now exists once again. But really, it's the inability to spam indirect against Tyrionids that I think makes them kind of relevant again. And as far as Compendium teams go, I think from day one they've always had a really cool amount of utility and things they can do, like order swapping and just the passive abilities that Gene Stealers get, and Tyranid warriors not getting injured and having that Synops aura, like pre-game, I guess pre-turn moves. They're just a team that has a really cool toolbox as far as a Compendium team goes, and I think they're one of the teams that has benefited the most from the grenade change. And then last, just barely clinging on to relevancy in my eyes, is Commorites. They were able to top 8 at LVO, but that was like 5 months ago now. I think that they don't particularly love the grenade change, but I don't think they hate it either, because they actually do have a really good selection of equipment, so they're pretty much fine without spamming plasma grenades, in my opinion. Commorites are a pretty cool team. In my eyes, they're not much worse than Corsairs, to be honest. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Commorites. We've always kind of liked them here, and I'm curious to see if anybody else continues to play them and do well with them. If you're running Drakari in your local scene, do not be too dispelled, because as you can see, I think you can play them at a real event and not expect a top 3, obviously, but if you're a good player and you're piloting them well, I think there is a real chance at a top 8 with this team. So yeah. Now we're going to go to the A tiers. Deathguard. Speaking of Compendium, Deathguard is last Dataslate we kind of put Deathguard in, I think it was either A or B tier, really bumping them up from where they were in like D tier originally, because of the 6th Plague Marine after the first Dataslate. And since then, we've actually seen Plague Marines do really well at a lot of different tournaments. They performed pretty admirably at, I believe it was San Diego Open. I think we had somebody place like 3rd or 4th with Plague Marines with Deathguard. I say Plague Marines because I'm fairly certain that they were not running Poxwalkers. And I had a lot of competitive players come up to me after that weekend or message me after that weekend and be like, man, Deathguard is really annoying. I do not want to play against that team again at a tournament. And I kind of called that one. I don't want to like brag or anything, but seriously though, I don't consider them to be like a high A tier team. I think they're probably the lowest of the A tiers that we're going to get into here. I just wanted to start with them because 6 Marines with 3 up saves and disgustingly resilient, effectively bringing them up to 18 wounds on average. That is a really awful thing to play against sometimes, especially for teams that don't have like AP2. Even with AP2, sometimes you're really not going to be doing enough damage to reliably take this team off the board. There's a lot of auras. They're not super easy to play, I think, at a high level, but I don't think you need to be amazing to sit down with this team and cause people problems. So, yeah, Deathguard. Let's move up to Commandos. Some people are probably going to give me grief over this, but I think Commandos are pretty rapidly falling down the tiers for me. I mean, not I say that, but I mean they were A tier before, but I don't know. I don't love tournament win rates. I made a whole video about that. I don't really value that data too much, but if you look at that, Commandos have a pretty low win rate for a couple months now, despite being one of the highest played teams. And if you look at data that I do find relevant, which is top 3s and podiums, Commandos aren't really doing well over there either. They just kind of aren't the powerhouse that they once were. The grenade change is certainly good for them. They were already only taking 1 dynamite. They kind of had that nerf before everyone else for some reason. But yeah, I mean, not having to worry about crack grenades as much is definitely nice for Commandos, but I don't think it solves a lot of their problems against the top teams. I think that Commandos are still going to have some issues playing into the more competitive specialist teams right now. They're not, in my eyes, anymore one of the top options. Unfortunately, because Commandos are cool and they're fun, and they've got some of the best models in this edition, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that they're really kind of lacking now. But let's move on. Up next is Compendium Guard, which I believe, yeah, this is the highest ranked Compendium team we have on the tier list now, and for pretty good reason. Although I will say, Compendium Guard is really going to miss grenades. That is a team that tends to just take a bunch of grenades. The rest of their equipment is not really mind-blowing, to be honest. So, I mean, maybe they belong behind Commandos post-grenade nerf, but I'm going to choose to keep them up here because they are still a very interesting team. They get so many free buffs out of the orders, and I just, I really like the team. Their profiles, as far as running 10 Scions go, you've got 10 models with 4 up saves that are hitting on 3s with at least bolt guns. So, and they're always rerolling 1s. They are proof that just being a really solid shooting team with a good amount of bodies and like decent fundamentals can be a serious threat. So I consider Imperial Guard to be the best Compendium team, and I consider them to be better than at least these 3 bespoke teams here, Commandos, Corsairs, and Blooded. Although I will say it's very close with Commandos. You could easily put Commandos above, and I wouldn't have any problem with that, but I think they're pretty close in the rankings. Next up, we have Warp Coven, who is actually they're kind of struggling right now. I think a lot of the good players jumped off of Warp Coven because you had some really good players playing Warp Coven, and then when the Morok box came out and like the Void Dancers came out and the Nachman box, like with all these releases, it seems like all the Warp Coven players, like they kind of knew they were a step behind the Chelnath and the Vetguard, and they kind of wanted to try something new. At least this is my thought. This seems like what happened, having talked to some of the better Warp Coven players in the scene. And as a result, when the best players for a faction stop playing them, the win rate's going to drop. They're going to stop making top 3s. And that is exactly what's happened. As far as top 3s go, they're actually, like, other than blooded. They're the worst bespoke team right now as far as podiums go. So, I mean, I think I've been tracking win rates, which I'll post in another video at some point soon. Not win rates. I've been tracking top threes at tournaments since the beginning of May on BCP, and I believe Warpcoven has like a single top three. I mean, even Phobos, who've been out for like 2 weeks, have like double that, quadruple that. So, there's something up with Warpcoven. I think they're going to love the grenade changes personally. Crack grenades really gave them a lot of trouble. And they're a team that doesn't have grenades. They're one of the few that don't have any grenades at all. So being able to compete a little more in that regard is something that's really nice. I still think they're great, but probably a step behind from where I had them before. I had them in the S tier last tier list, I believe. And undeniably, they've kind of taken a step back. And I don't know. I hope that the Warpcoven players kind of return to the faction, because I think they're a cool faction. I do think they're pretty good. They've got a lot of tricks. They're really interesting. They're fun to watch. I've said in the past that I don't think they're very fun to play against, and I maintain that. But they are fun to watch from like a spectator view. So, and then we have the last team in A tier, which is Legionnaire, which is kind of the opposite, where Legionnaire is a team that I was not super high on upon release, but they've actually been doing very well in tournaments. Their win rate, flat win rate, isn't crazy, but they've been top 3ing a lot. I think a lot of that has to do with like smaller RTTs. I think if you take out the data from like 8-man tournaments or 10-man tournaments, and like you look strictly at like 16+ player tournaments, I think the top 3 data for Legionnaires drops off quite a bit. But I mean, there's no denying that this is a faction that is doing pretty well right now, despite being a very melee heavy 6 model, elite team. A lot of people seem to have come to the conclusion that Nurgle is the way to go, which I totally called that, by the way. I was totally on the Nurgle train, although part of that had to do with the fact that I just like Nurgle aesthetically, so take that with a grain of salt, if you will. But seriously, they are doing way better than I expected them to. I'm pretty impressed with how good Legionnary's been, and I've seen people do it with Slanesh. I've seen people do it with Khorne, but the meta does seem to be shifting towards Nurgle, and understandably so. It's those models get super tanky and hard to deal with when you have the Nurgle buffs online. So Legionnaries, pretty good team. Highest in A tier for me. But we're gonna move on now, because we're getting into the S tiers, and let's start with the newly nerfed Void Dancers. So I was obviously a bit lower on Void Dancers than most people were pre-nerf. There was a lot of panic about Void Dancers, about how they were like stomping tournaments and doing very well, although their top 3 data wasn't particularly crazier than the other top teams. Their actual win rates, so their performances at mid and lower levels especially, were pretty impressive. They were pretty dominant. But now they've been nerfed. I think the most impressive things about them, so Segrak's Jest has taken a hit, which I thought was necessary, and they have nerfed the CP gain that the team was getting from their Sadath, which I think the nerfs were really good. Ryan and I talk about it in our Dataslate breakdown. The as of now, I still have them in S tier, and I still think that they are pretty good team. But undeniably, I think that they're not quite going to be as dominant as they were before. There's more tools, and a lot of people are going to say that the grenade nerf is good for them. I think with the new domino field that the Void Dancers got, it's actually not really going to matter that much, except for in situations where they are concealed in cover, because they changed it so that if you're within 6 inches, domino field doesn't work anyway. So, grenades don't really affect that. For me, that doesn't really move the needle, and how I rank this team. You could say that, now they can't take double prismatic grenades. I don't think that the best Harlequin players were taking double prismatic grenades anyway. So yeah, the grenade nerf is really not super important to me in regards to the Void Dancer placement. It has a lot more to do with the nerfs themselves and relative to how I viewed the team before. So yeah, so let's move on to the next team, which is I'm trying to remember. Oh, Phobos. Yes, Phobos. The other side of the Morok box, the 6-man elite Phobos, which a lot of people were kind of disappointed that Phobos was even going to be a team because it was just an upgrade sprue basically for infiltrators and incursors. And flavor wise, it's not the most exciting thing, but I think they play very well. The Omni Scramble ability is just amazing. They've been having really good performances over in Spain since the team has been available to people. So Phobos are legitimately a serious threat. I don't think personally that they stack up evenly against the teams that I'm going to have in the S++ tier. I think they're still a step behind just based on the fact that they're getting out-activated so heavily. But, I mean, there's no denying that I think personally this is the best elite team right now. And they have so many tricks, and they have a really high skill ceiling, which is something that I really like about them, because that's how I evaluate these teams. I evaluate them by their skill ceiling, not what they're doing at the mid and low tables. So Phobos is a team that I see as having the potential for a good player to come in and just be like a total like guru, like master on them. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some people pick up Phobos and just start like doing very well at tournaments. But I do think they're not a super easy team to pilot extremely well. Because of the elite functionality of this team, it's hard for me to put them in the S+, the top tiers, so to speak. Omni Scramble is amazing, though. I can't get over how good that ability is. It kind of like offsets the entire downside to losing initiative a lot of the time, which is, in my opinion, one of the most brutal things in this game is you're in a really close game and it's like turn 2 or 3 and your opponent gets initiative and it just kind of spells doom for you. But the Phobos can kind of play around that. They can say, hey, that one guy, he doesn't get to go. That guy that was about to ruin my day, no, he can't go for like 4 activations. So yeah, Phobos are great. Do not sleep on them. They're one of the better teams in the game right now. And then we're going to go to the top of S tier with Wormblade. Wormblade is pretty great. They don't love the nerf to grenades, in my opinion. I think they're a team that is going to consider this a nerf. Some people are going to say, oh, well, you can still take, 1 frag and 1 blasting charge. I have played like unspeakable amount of games with Wormblade. They're probably the team that I've played the most this edition. I can't remember a game where I took frag grenades, and I really do not think frag grenades are super relevant outside of like the hordiest of hordes that like bunch up, and even then it's really, you're relying on your opponent kind of messing up and putting your models in blast range, because ultimately it's not that hard to avoid blast range, especially if it's not a weapon that has unlimited range like frag grenades do. So I mean, really, I would almost always default to taking 2 blasting charges, and if I was against like certain teams, I would take 3 blasting charges. But now you can't do that, and I mean, Wormblade has other equipment choices, and I think overall it's more interesting that we can only take 1 blasting charge. But it is definitely, in my eyes, a nerf to the faction. That being said, Wormblade is still very, very good. They won the most recent CPTS spring tournament, Micromancer placing first, and I placed 3rd in that tournament. So obviously, Wormblade can be taken to that level. There's no doubt about that. The nerf to grenades is unfortunate for them, in my opinion, because they loved a couple blasting charges. Now they only get 1. But I'm very high on this team. I don't think that they compete against these top teams, but everything else on this list, everything that's currently on this list right now, I think Wormblade is a winning matchup against them. So take from that what you will. Now we're going to move on to the S++, because we no longer have like a wholly trinity of S++ teams. Now there's a fourth. We're going to start with the lowest of them, which in my opinion is the only one of the teams up here that really, really does not like the grenade nerf. And I'll explain as I go along. So, Veteran Guard, we had them at the top last tier list, but now I think that they are the worst of the tip top. But the nerf is definitely not enough for me to take them out of that tier. I still think that they are an incredibly good team. The fact that they can't triple up on crack grenades anymore is kind of a huge deal for them. I don't think it's going to be enough of a huge deal where they stop taking the 4 extra troopers instead of the artillery. But, the 3 crack grenades, that's 3 threats, 3 actual killing threats outside of your specialists that you had access to. Now you only get 1. So those 4 troops that you're getting, only one of them is capable of killing a Space Marine, which is outrageous, I know. They really don't like that, especially because I think their alternative options for equipment pieces aren't spectacular compared to the other top teams that we're going to talk about here. You've got the shovels, and you could take that map to reroll initiative. I actually think that might be like an auto take now. You're going to take 1 crack for 3 points. You're going to take a Rosarius for 2. Maybe you'll take a frag for 2. And then you've got 3 points left. So, what do you do with that? Maybe the hotshot capacitor packs become relevant. I don't really think so. I think people are going to start taking that map to reroll initiative because that's the kind of thing that wins you a game if you just get it once. So, and it was always something that I thought was kind of it's too bad you can't take it because cracks are so good, but now you actually can take it. So I don't know, maybe I'll take that, but compared to like novitiates and pathfinders who are also going to be hit by the grenade nerf, I don't think that Vetguard have amazing alternatives to fill in those equipment points. So outside of the Rosarius, which you were kind of taking a lot of the time already, you were just taking 2 crack grenades instead of 3. But let's move on to the next one, which is our newly buffed AdMech Hunterclade Overlords. So, this might be a hot take. I think, and you have to consider the fact that, in my opinion, Hunterclade was never the worst bespoke team after the Nachtmund release. I always thought Corsairs were worse than them. I was saying this when we did the last data slate, or I keep saying data slate, when we did the last tier list. I was saying that I think Hunterclade are not the worst, and everybody said that Hunterclade was the worst. So for me, I think there was like 4 bullets on those buffs that they got. You could have just picked one of those buffs for Hunterclade, and it would have moved them into like borderline S tier for me, just because I think in the hands of a good player, they can obviously do very well. It's just that they're a team with a really high skill ceiling. They're not easy to play well. And you pair that with the fact that almost nobody plays them at all. And of course, Hunterclade are going to look like a bad team when you're just looking at, those kinds of small sample size statistics. But those changes, going up to 11 models, first of all, is amazing. One of the additional model being another Sicarian is just so good. Being able to take a 3rd gunner, although not, necessarily game breaking, it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to make their backline a bit more threatening, especially on some terrain layouts. But really, the deprecation changes. The fact that you can change your I forget what it's called. I'm going to say canticle. I know it's not called canticle, but the fact that you can change the canticle every turn now instead of only twice a game is really good, and you don't suffer the deprecation on the first turn that you take it. So there's going to be games where you never even have to think about the deprecation because you're changing every turn maybe. And it's those changes are buffs to one of their better tech ops, which is I forget the name of it, but it's the one where if you do more damage with your certain canticle online, you get a point, and then you switch your canticle, and then you do more damage again than your opponent, and you get it. Now you can change your thing every turn, so I think that's a buff to it. There's more opportunities for you to make that work by switching to a killier one. by taking like one of the more defensive ones on turn 1 or something, you're not robbing yourself of offensive output later in the game. So I really like that. And then the cherry on top is the grenade nerf. They were one of the only specialist teams that don't have grenades. Now, every other team, their scariest grenades have been hamstrung. So you put all this together, and I think you legitimately have one of the best teams in the game with Hunterclade, which is just so weird to say. I mean, even me, I was a Hunterclade believer back when everybody thought they were bad. To say that they're an S++ team feels almost wrong, but I mean, I think when you look at the team for what they are, this is it. When you line it all up like this, it's an easy choice for me to make them one of the top 3 teams in the game and even put them above Deathguard. So Hunterclade is the new hotness. Go build Hunterclade. Play them. They're awesome. They were pretty good before. Now they're just like bonkers. So next up, and this is a tough choice for me because it's almost like a gut reaction to say that novitiates are the number 1 because they have just been stomping tournaments. But I'm going to put novitiates as the second best. Novitiates are really, really stupid to play against in this game, in my opinion. The faith point system is just like, as a gimmick, it's like their main gimmick is the fact that they have access to like 30 plus rerolls a game for free. I mean, compare that to Blooded. Their gimmick is they can pick a couple guys at a time, or I think only they can pick a handful of guys to retain 1 hit before rolling. And it's harder to get access to those Blooded tokens than it is to get access to faith points. I mean, how do you even compare that? Novitiates have, I think, the best like core ability of any team in the game. The faith point system is really oppressive, and a lot of people are going to say that novitiates losing an extra crack grenade is a nerf. I'm going to explain why it's actually a net buff this overall, because for starters, one of their more powerful abilities was blinding aura, and the only way to get around that, other than having multiple targets, was indirect. So if you take away another crack grenade from the teams that novitiates are playing against, that's one less tool to get around blinding aura. Furthermore, yes, the novitiates are going to be taking one less crack grenade, but unlike Veteran Guard, novitiates have quite a few really good options for their faith points, whether they just want to put 3 faith points into 3 more auto chastisers, or they want to get more creative and look at the other options. The novitiates are perfectly fine, and I think if I'm a novitiate player right now, I'm actually pretty happy to see the grenade nerf. First of all, it's more interesting for me, although I think it's not going to be super interesting because it's just going to be 3 auto chastisers that you weren't taking before. But I don't have to worry about other teams crack spamming me, which was something that novitiates really did not like playing against. I mean, even ignoring the indirect thing, the crack profile is very good against the novitiate chassis. So seeing less of that is definitely good on the top tables for this team. And just in general, I think they're an insane team. They are debatably the best team in the game. If somebody tells me they think novitiates are the best team in the game, I am not going to hold that against them. But segue, I think that the best team in the game is Pathfinders. So Pathfinders, they're another team that quote-unquote got hit by the grenade nerf, but actually there was two schools of thought with Pathfinders, and I talked about this in our Dataslate review. There's the marker light heavy style, and there's the grenade heavy style. The marker light heavy style was finding more success than the grenade heavy style. Yes, you no longer have access to that grenade spam, but Pathfinders are actually okay without it. They have a whole other playstyle that was debatably better already that didn't involve taking more than, just your Grenadier. And that's another thing that I haven't really been bringing up, is some teams have Grenadiers, so that one grenade that you're going to take anyway, you have a model that doesn't need to spend equipment points to get access to that. And that's, another reason why Deathguard kind of struggle with that nerf, because they don't have a Grenadier on the team. Pathfinders have a Grenadier. They have a playstyle that doesn't involve spamming grenades, and they're perfectly happy in a meta that has less grenades coming at them as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what else to say about Pathfinders. They're not quite as they're not showing up quite as often on like podiums relative to how good I think they're. I think they're still the team that has the most top threes since the beginning of May in my data. But basically, I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Tau are just not a super popular team in general, and I think the reputation that Pathfinder's had after release of being super mega broken kind of made people shy away from wanting to play them as much. But I do think they're probably still the best team in the game. They are just so good. They have so many models. They have so many guys that just hit like a truck, and they're perfectly okay with the grenade situation that we have now in Kill Team. So this wraps up the summer tier list, and this is what I expect to see. So honestly, let me know what you guys think. Repeating what I said earlier, this is just my opinion. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments, and I'll be happy to chat with you guys in there. So shout out to our subscribers. If you're enjoying this video, or you stumbled upon this video and you like Kill Team and you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. We're getting pretty close to 6,000 subs, which I mean, we've been hanging in the 5K range for like ever. So I would love to see us at 6,000. And shout out, as always, to our followers over at patreon.com/commandpoint. You guys are the best, and your names are going to be coming down the screen at some point. So this is the Command Point tier list, and this is Shane signing out.